Hello, my name is Moshe Shechter. I'm with the Alma product management team, and what I'd like to discuss over the next hour or so is the Alma resource sharing functionality. Quite a complicated functionality with many configuration aspects and workflow aspects, and I'd like us to try to cover as much as we can the different options of resource sharing in terms of configuration and workflow. So we'll start with presenting the different models that exist for resource sharing. There are actually two quite different ways to do resource sharing in Alma. We'd like to discuss both. For each one of these options, we will discuss the configurations that are related to setting them up, and of course also describe the workflows and the points of integration that relate to each one of the different resource sharing models. The first one is what we call the external broker. In this external broker model, we can see that there are a number of players in the process of managing the resource sharing request, one of which is of course Alma on the lower part of this diagram. The other is Primo, from which the request is placed, and a third one is an external broker, which is actually a non-Libris system which is designed to manage resource sharing requests. There are a number of such commercial applications out there that are widely used at Libris, and in this model Alma relies on this external broker to be the system that does the resource sharing process. So the process starts with a patron searching any discovery interface, as we'll see, but let's speak about the classic situation where the search starts in Primo or in Primo Central. The search then finds some metadata that is requested, and then Alma is brought into the picture to display within Primo the services that are available for the found metadata. One of these services may be a resource sharing request. So the patron is presented with this resource sharing request option, and placing that request, as can be seen in the small little interface that we see right now and we'll come back to later, the request goes on into the external broker system, thereby existing as a request within the external broker and managed at the external broker system. Of course, the patron does not have to go through Primo. We also directly access the external broker and place the request in that external broker system. Anyways, the further processing of the request from the external broker system will continually update Alma with information about the steps that the request is going through. So when anything happens with the request, it is sent, received, returned, and so on, Alma will continually be updated by the external broker so that Alma will be able to reflect internally the status of the request as it is managed at the external broker. So this is one model. This is the external broker. And as you understand, and again we'll go into the details in just a number of minutes, the resource sharing request is mainly managed at the external broker. Alma simply reflects the request and reflects the changes in status that happen at the external broker, which is the main owner and manager of the request. Primo may serve as a means to find the metadata that is to be requested, but then the request goes on into the external broker. That is one model, and we'll go into its details in just a number of minutes. The other model is what we call the peer-to-peer model. In this model, there is no external broker, as you can see. The only players in this model are Primo and Alma, of course communicating with another partner, another resource sharing partner, which may be any other system, which Alma is not explicitly aware of which system that is, just of the means by which that system can be communicated with. So the process in this model starts, like before, with a search that is done in Primo, retrieving some metadata that is requested. That may be from Primo, may be from Primo Central. And again, Alma is consulted for calculating services and supplying the resource sharing option as a valid option, after which the request goes not into the external broker, but into Alma. So that as you can see in this model, Alma is the owner of the request, and Alma is going to be the system that will manage the entire life cycle of this request. Alma will therefore send the request to the peer suppliers or receive requests from peer suppliers or peer requesters. So Alma will be managing the direct communication with the resource sharing partner, be it a lender or a borrower. So these are the two models, and just before we go into the details of each one of these models, I would like to discuss some configurations that have to do with both models, be it a peer-to-peer model or a broker model. And that's the list of them. The first of which is the resource sharing library. All communications and all of the request management in either models is managed by the resource sharing library. The resource sharing library is a library like any other library. It is configured from the list of libraries that is configured for the institution, with an additional attribute that is set on marking this library as a resource sharing library. All of the requests, be it borrowing requests or lending requests, will be owned by the resource sharing library. An institution willing to manage resource sharing must have at least one resource sharing library, but may have additional resource sharing libraries. And the operators managing the resource sharing request must have a role within the resource sharing library. The role must be a fulfillment services operator or a manager, and the scope of that role must be the resource sharing library. That will give the operator access to the relevant links that we'll see for managing the borrowing or lending resource sharing requests. And that brings us on to the second bullet on this list, and actually the second and third one: policies, terms of use, rules. Being that the resource sharing library is a standard library with just an additional attribute marking it as resource sharing library, all of its policies and terms of use are managed just like they are managed for any other library. So that you have a fulfillment unit that manages the resource sharing library, and that fulfillment unit has policies and terms of use and rules by which items in that resource sharing library will be managed. And perhaps just a minute to expand a bit on that. When items are received for a borrowing request or shipped out for a lending request, the items become owned by the resource sharing library, so that anything that I have shipped away for a lending request is temporarily moved to the resource sharing library. We'll see that as we go through the workflow. Likewise, any request or any item that is received for a borrowing request is made part of the or owned by the resource sharing library. We'll see that also as we go through the workflow. Being that these items for lending requests or for borrowing requests are both managed by the resource sharing library, the policies, terms of use, and the loan and request rules that are assigned to the resource sharing library's fulfillment unit will be used for controlling the way that this item is going to be circulated. So there is no need to expand more on that. We're all familiar with policies, terms of use, and rules, and these are no different for the resource sharing library. So an item, for example, that is received as part of a borrowing request and is then lent out to a patron will be lent out with the due date rules that are set up for the resource sharing library. And likewise, items that have been shipped away for a lending request will be requestable for the library patrons or not be requestable as set in the request terms of use for the resource sharing library. Just to briefly mention, the resource sharing library and the fulfillment unit has two additional sets of rules which have to do with explicitly with managing the resource sharing request itself. There is a borrowing resource sharing rule type and another lending resource sharing rule type, which are intended to manage the way that the resource sharing request itself is controlled. The borrowing terms of use control parameters such as will the resource sharing request trigger fees for the patron, which type of patron may place resource sharing requests, and whether this patron has a limit as to the number of resource sharing requests that he may place. These are the types of policies that are controlled by a borrowing resource sharing request, or actually a borrowing resource sharing rule type in the resource sharing fulfillment unit. The other configurations here have to do with display logic rules. We'll see some examples of those. But the display logic rules are a general configuration means that controls the services that are displayed in the Get It tab in Primo. It controls what links appear in the View tab. It controls what request options appear in the Get It tab, and it may be used also to control whether resource sharing request will appear in the Get It tab. We'll see some examples of these as we go on. The item creation rules control how items that are received through a borrowing request will be created. I do not want to expand into that. That may be confusing to some. I'd just like to mention that there are rules that may control how items will be created when received from a borrowing request. And after noting that, I would like to go on into the workflow and perhaps touch upon these configurations as we go through the workflow, and perhaps having them clearer that way. So I would like to take us on to the broker system model and first go through that model and describe the workflow by which external broker managed systems are managed. What we see right now are the participants in a typical broker system workflow. On the left hand of this diagram, we can see the borrower institution. Let's call it institution A. And on the right side, we see institution B, which is going to be the lending institution in our described workflow. So institution A is going to be requesting something from institution B. In between these two institutions, we can see the broker system. A typical broker system, the one that is supported by Alma, is going to be NCIP based. NCIP is a protocol that is intended to enable integration between library systems and resource sharing systems, and is therefore the protocol that Alma uses to integrate with resource sharing systems. It is widely used, commonly used for resource sharing systems, and is therefore the one that Alma works with. So both of these institutions may share the same broker system. They may actually be using the same broker system. They may be using different broker systems. It doesn't make any difference in terms of how Alma communicates with this broker. So for the sake of simplicity, let's assume a single system, and that's going to be the common use case that is used by both institution A and B, borrower and lender. First, the requester places the request. As we mentioned in the beginning of this discussion, the request may be managed or may be placed via Primo and Alma, or may be directly placed into the broker system without going through Alma or Primo. That is, by accessing the discovery interface that the broker system many times applies. Once a request exists in the broker system is in charge of finding a proper lender, or a proper potential lender for this request. It is relevant for Alma how that broker system does that, although we'll see how that is determined by the broker system. But that broker system is the one that is going to be choosing some lending institution as the required lender for this request. And for the sake of our example, let's assume that that institution is an Alma institution, institution B in our example. The broker system is going to be notifying institution B that a request has been placed for you to manage. That is what we call a request item, and that will trigger the request to be copied into institution B as the lender institution. Now institution B reflects the fact that there is a request in the broker system that is intended to be fulfilled by institution B. The operator at institution B will be using the broker system to actually ship away an item. So Alma at this point will be used by the operator to find the item which is on a shelf at the library. Alma as the library system will be used by the operator to find that item and be able to fetch it and bring it over to the broker system where the shipment action is going to be registered. Once the shipment action is registered at the broker system will notify Alma, I have sent this item out for the purpose of fulfilling this request. Alma will now be able to reflect the fact that the item has been not only requested but also shipped away. That means that the request will be marked as shipped and the item will be marked as non-available and as managed by the resource sharing process. We'll see these details as we go into the details of the process in just a minute. The next action in this workflow is where the requester receives the item. Again, registering the fact that I've received an item is done at the broker system, which notifies Alma that I've received an item using a message we call accept item. Alma will now be able to reflect on the borrowing side the fact that there is a request or an item that has been received for fulfilling a request. So now both the broker system and Alma reflect the same fact. An item has been received for the purpose of fulfilling a specific borrowing request. Alma will now be the tool that the library operators will be using to move this item to the requested pickup location, which has been communicated via the accept item message, and actually do the loan to the patron, and from there manage this item as loaned, like in a normal loan, to the requesting patron. We'll see these details in just a minute. Once the patron returns the item, at the library, using Alma interfaces for doing the check-in action, the item is going to be moved over back to the resource sharing library, where an operator will be shipping it back to the lending institution using the broker system. So registering the fact that the item has been sent back to the lending institution will be done at the broker system. The broker system will notify Alma, I have shipped this item back to the lending institution. Alma, when receiving this message, will delete the item that has created when the accept item message came in. It will mark the request as completed and actually close the loop in terms of the Alma angle for managing this request. When the item is received back at the lender, this receive action is again registered at the broker system, which notifies Alma that the item has been received back and lets Alma put the item in process of putting the item back in its permanent shelving location. So this is the diagram. We'll look at the details in just a minute. But this diagram should point to you the fact that all of the actions happen at the broker system. So the borrowing side manages the receiving of the item and then the shipping it back at the broker system. The broker system notifies Alma, I've received the item, I've shipped it back. But these actions happen at the broker system, and Alma is actually not needed for this part of the process. Alma does reflect that the request exists and supports the library aspects of managing the request in terms of moving the item to the requested pickup location, lending it out to the patron, and getting it back from the patron. Likewise, on the lending side, the actions are registered at the broker system. So the broker system knows about the request, and moving the item, shipping it to the borrower is also registered at the lending broker system, as is receiving the item back. In all of these cases, the broker system notifies Alma, which is then able to reflect on the fact that there is a request and that it has been shipped away. So let's hop over and look at the details of this. As we mentioned, the request may be pushed through Alma via Primo into the broker system, or actually be placed directly at the broker system. To be able to push a request into Alma, Alma may do that in one of two ways. It may either place an open URL on the Get-It as a service, or place some static URL that also pushes into the broker system. And this is what the configuration looks like. When configuring the partner which is the entity that is used to control the NCIP messages, there is a tab there for the parameters where the option to push, we call it the pushing method, will be an open URL or a link. Systems that enable receiving request information using an open URL, such as the relay systems, the relay D2D and relay ILL systems, will be configured in Alma with the open URL option and with the base URL in the URL template field. Systems that do not support an open URL and actually may receive only a static URL, such as the OCC Navigator system, will be configured with the link option over here and with the static link in the URL template field over here. The result of this will be that the patron searching in Primo will be getting a Get It tab from Alma, and then the clicking on the link in the Get It will actually push the request directly into the broker system. In this example, I've put here the D2D system, the relay system, which uses the open URL for that. But of course, it may be also the OCC Navigator system, or actually any system that may receive an open URL or some other URL to push requests into it. The request does not have to go through Primo. Actually, the metadata for the borrowing request may start from some other discovery tool, such as Google Scholar. So the patron may have started the search in Google, found the metadata that it needs, and then if that discovery, say Google Scholar, may send an open URL to Alma to trigger a services page, one of the getting services will be the resource sharing. So this is standard. I mean, you can receive a getted services page either by searching in Primo or by searching any other discovery interface that can send an open URL to Alma as a resolver. Once Alma receives the open URL, it will open up the Get It services page, and one of the services in the Get It will be the resource sharing, which will in turn push the request into the resource sharing system. And this is what it looks like. This is on the top here. This is a record in Primo, or actually a services page that has been triggered from an open URL from Google Scholar. In either case, we'll see the metadata on top, and we'll see the services options in the Get It tab. In this example, I've configured Relay as my NCIP partner, and I've configured the open URL so that clicking on this will actually push directly into a relay page with the metadata already identified by the relay system based on the information supplied in the open URL. So that now the operator, the requester, actually is in relay and is able to go on placing the request within the relay system. Now it is important to note when the request arrives into Relay, Relay will be able, or any other broker system, will be able to identify the potential lender as we mentioned. How is that done? Well, that's done based, many times, normally, based on a Z3950 search. So that the broker system, and again, just as an example, I've used D2D here, the broker system knows about the availability of the members of this sharing network based on a virtual catalog that is actually based on a search by a Z3950 and using the OPAC syntax, so that all of the members participating in this sharing network need to be able to expose their catalog, their inventory, and its availability via a Z3950 query in the OPAC syntax. So of course Alma is also able to do that, and therefore Alma is able to participate in a resource sharing network that is done this way. This is just an example of a OPAC syntax response that is supplied by Alma. We can see that the response includes information about the availability of inventory in terms of its library location call number and whether the items are available or not, including even a barcode for the available items. By getting this response is how the broker system knows that Alma has this resource, and that is how the broker system knows to turn to Alma as the potential supplier for this request, and actually request Alma to be the supplier of this request. So now, if we go back to the workflow, what we've actually described until now is how the patron starts the request. The patron started it in Primo Central, or in some other discovery, found the metadata that he wants, got a Get It tab in Primo, and had a resource sharing link in there. Clicking on it, placed a request in the broker system. The broker system now is able to select Alma as the lender based on the Z3950 query that has been placed with Alma, and based on the Alma response. The next steps in this process involve NCIP-based integrations. As we'll go into the next steps in the workflow, we'll see that Alma will now be communicating with the broker system based on NCIP. So just a few key parameters to understand about Alma and NCIP. Alma supports version 2 of NCIP. That's first thing that needs to be noted. That means that the broker system also needs to work with version 2 of NCIP. Systems that currently work with Alma do support this version, and of course, as additional broker systems will be integrated with Alma, they will also have to meet this requirement of supporting version 2 of NCIP. Another two prerequisites for working with Alma and NCIP are that the broker system knows about the institution code of the Alma institution that is going to be integrating with that system. The NCIP message needs to include that institution code in the toAgency element of the NCIP message. Without going into details, too much details of the NCIP message, it just must include the institution code in there. That enables Alma to identify that incoming NCIP message is associated with this institution. And do remember that Alma, as a multi-tenant system, must receive this identification in the NCIP message, or it will not know what institution this message is intended for. The other key element that the broker system must be able to supply is the application profile type, which is another element of the NCIP message. This element must identify the NCIP partner to which this NCIP message is directed. So when configuring the NCIP partner, the application profile type, the partner code, is defined, and that partner code must be used by the broker system to identify the NCIP message as associated with this NCIP partner within Alma. So what happens now? Let's look at the borrowing side and then at the lending side. We have placed the request. We saw that the request could be going directly into the broker system, D2D in this example, either directly or via Primo. And just to mention that if the request goes through Primo and through the Get It link, this gives the advantage of being able to use Alma policies that I've mentioned to control this link. So for example, the link may be at all omitted from Primo for users of certain type. So if, for example, the resource sharing option should be exposed only to, or should not be exposed to undergrads, the display logic rules may be used to hide this link from undergrads. What of course you cannot do if you go directly into the broker system, but you can do if you use the Get It tab and the display logic rules to hide this option from undergrads. Or if you want to associate limits and say the patron is not allowed to place more than 10 requests, so that if this 10 limit is reached by the patron, the link will not show up on the Get It. If you use Primo and the Get It tab to expose this link, you can make use of such policies. What of course you cannot do if the link goes directly into the broker system without going through Get It. So these are just the advantages of using Get It. You can control in terms of policies when the link will show and when it will not show. Once the request is in the broker system, as we mentioned, the broker system will find the lender based on the Z3950, and then the item will be received. When the item will be received at the borrower, the borrower is going to move this item to the requested pickup location, which may be any other library within the receiving institution. So the resource sharing library, the resource sharing department, may be receiving an item and moving it to the main library, which is where the patron requested to pick up this item. There, when received at the main library, the patron will receive a notification, actually a standard on-hold shelf notification, letting the patron know that the item is waiting for the patron to collect it at the required pickup location, say the main library. Patron will come to the desk and make a loan. This is standard fulfillment. The item, once received, exists in Alma as a temporary item and may therefore just be loaned out using normal procedures. And as I mentioned, the terms of use that will be associated with this loan are those that have been set up for the resource sharing library in the resource sharing terms of use at the resource sharing fulfillment unit. The loan is a standard loan, so that it shows up on the loan list at the circulation desk in the Primo. In my account, it is just a standard loan. Alma will send courtesy notices for this loan, will send overdue notifications for this loan, just like it does for any other loan, being that, as far as Alma is concerned, this loan is a standard loan and is not different from any other loan. So the patron will, in time, return the item back to the main library, where the item is going to be moved back to the resource sharing department. There, it's going to be sent back to the lending, the institution that has lent this item. And actually, this terminates the workflow in terms of the borrower side. The item has been received, the patron got it, the patron returned it, we shipped it back to the lender. What I'd like to do now is briefly discuss the integration points that are used throughout this process. We mentioned that NCIP is the way that the integration is done. And the first message that may be used is the lookup user. This message is not used by all broker systems, but may be used by some, for example, the relay UTD system. And the lookup user is going to be used, where it is used, by the broker system to get information about the requesting patron. It may be used to authorize the fact that this patron is at all allowed to place a resource sharing request, but will also be used by the broker system to retrieve contact information such as emails for the requesting patron. That will enable the broker system to also communicate with the patron if that is required by the library, and send, for example, emails for the patron based on up-to-date emails that are stored within Alma. Again, not all broker systems use that. OCC Navigator does not, for example, but where used, that is how it's going to be used. The next message that may be used by the broker system is the accept item message. That is used by the broker system when the item is received for the borrowing request. It notifies Alma that the item has arrived, and it lets Alma create the temporary item. It's going to create the temporary bib record with all the metadata that is received in the accept item message. It's going to create a temporary holdings at the resource sharing library for the received item, and it's going to create a temporary item for the received item. It will also associate a request with this item and associate a pickup location for this request, which will be the pickup location where the patron wants to receive this item. The next integration point will be when the item is returned by the patron and shipped back to the lender. This action is again done at the broker system, and the broker system uses the check-in item message to notify Alma that the item has been shipped back to the lender. Alma, when receiving this message, will remove the temporary item, the temporary holdings, the temporary bib record. The entire hierarchy is going to be removed, and the borrowing request will be labeled as complete. That actually wraps up the borrowing side. When looking at the lending side, it all starts with a message coming in, a requested item message coming in. The message may come in via NCIP using a request item message, or may actually be done by manual typing in of the fact that there's a lending request. So for example, in the case of Relay, if we want to register the request before it is shipped, it may be done by typing in the message, the lending request. Other systems such as OCC Navigator will actually notify Alma that there is a lending request using the request item message. But in any case, the checkout item will be used by the broker system to notify Alma that the item has been shipped away. Alma will mark the item as shipped and will mark the resource sharing request as shipped. The next point of integration will be when the check-in item message comes in. That will notify Alma that the item has been received back, and Alma will trigger a process of restoring the item back to its permanent shelving location. In between these two, that is the checkout item and the check-in item on the lending side, there is the process where the lender actually manages the request. So the lender again received the fact that there is a request, and before shipping it away, the lender takes action to, of course, find the relevant resource and ship that resource away. There may be a number of flows here for the lender. The lender may actually be using an existing physical item to either ship it away as a physical shipment, or to digitize it and ship it as a document delivery service. Both of these processes will be managed by the lender using standard Alma fulfillment procedures, either for a move request to move the item from its permanent location to the resource sharing library where it's going to be shipped away, or by triggering a digitization process, which will be used to digitize the item and ship it away as a document delivery service. Of course, if the item already exists in digital format, there's no need to process any digitization request. Just do the document delivery from within Alma and mark the item as shipped in the broker system. Let's see what this looks like. What we see now is the lending requests task list, where all of the requests that have been received as a lender are listed. We see the full list of requests, and we can see that there's an option here for printing slips. This will enable the lender to approach the desks or the locations where the items are shelved and actually fetch the items from these locations to ship them away based on the slips. We can see that there are assignments tabs, so the lending requests may be managed by assigning them and reassigning them like many other task lists are. But perhaps the most interesting option here is the Manage Fulfillment Options. This is the option that enables the operator to actually go over to some shelf, or actually request an item to be pulled off a shelf for processing. Clicking on this will open up a page, a screen, that includes all of the fulfillment options that operator has for this requested title. If there are physical items for this item, these physical items will be listed down here, and the options to place requests on them will be available from the request link. Clicking on this request link will open a request form for the operator to either request for ship physically or for ship digitally. Placing a ship digitally request will create a digitalization request and trigger the entire digitalization process, the standard fulfillment digitalization process, which I will not describe in detail now. And using the ship physically option will trigger a move request, which is again a standard fulfillment process to move the item from the permanent location to the resource sharing library, from which it's going to be shipped away to the requesting institution. So these are just standard fulfillment processes, digitalization and move requests. So there's no need to describe them. If there is a digital copy already existent, the Manage Fulfillment options, of course, exposes this fact and enables a document delivery to be triggered to actually ship the digital copy. We'll see some more details about these processes later on, perhaps as we describe also the peer-to-peer process, as these actions are actually relevant for both the peer-to-peer model and the broker one that we're describing now. And perhaps one more word about the broker model. We mentioned that the NCIP messages are the ones used to communicate between the broker system and Alma. Just to briefly mention, and without going into too much detail about this, not to make this too complicated and confusing, but just to mention that the broker system may actually be managing more than one resource sharing department. So we may have as many, or 3 or 30, it does make a difference, operators all logging into the same broker system, but with different logins and therefore being associated with different resource sharing departments within the institution. Being that their login into the broker system affiliates them with some resource sharing department, the broker system is able to send NCIP messages with different application profile types, which, as we mentioned, are used by Alma to identify the message as belonging to one resource sharing department or another. So again, just briefly, and perhaps more details would be suitable in a different format, so not to confuse this discussion. Just to mention, you may have more than one resource sharing library. You may have the NCIP messages associated with more than one resource sharing library, so that if you have more than one department managing the resource sharing in the institution, you can have this set up in the broker system and in Alma by correlating the application profile types in the broker system and in Alma. These are the systems we currently work with and currently integrate with Relay DTD, with OCLC Navigator. With Iliad, there are currently integration points only for pushing the request into Iliad. Iliad also uses the OpenURL option. So from Primo, a request may be pushed into Iliad based on OpenURL. There is currently no integration for the later steps that require NCIP integration. That is planned for next year, but is not in place yet. For OCLC Navigator and for Relay DTD, these options do exist. I did mention the NCIP partners and the NCIP parameters. I will not go into these details right now, as I would like to go on into the peer-to-peer model as the other model for working. We mentioned that the workflow in peer-to-peer means that two sides actually directly communicate. There is no broker system. Alma is the one that manages the request, so that the entire process is directly managed. So we can put up a diagram like before with no broker system in between. The two institutions directly communicate. The request is sent directly from institution A to institution B. The ship message is also directly communicated as the received message and eventually the returned message. These messages are communicated via ISO. So institution A or B may be Alma, but may be any other ISO compliant system. In other words, Alma may communicate as borrower or as lender with other systems, including Aleph, Voyager, or any other ISO compliant system. The configuration is similar to the NCIP configuration in terms of configuring the resource sharing partners and the rotas, but perhaps I would like to skip over to the workflow presentation, and perhaps let's get acquainted with the configurations and the workflow together. So again, we're looking at a peer-to-peer model now. The request being placed is just like the NCIP model, meaning a search started in Primo, and there's a resource sharing link in the Get It tab, just as before. But as opposed to the broker model, this link will not push the request into the broker system. Instead, it will push the request into Alma. This is the form, which is an Alma form that will open up for submitting the resource sharing request. So the link does not take you into the broker system, it takes you into Alma. And you get this Alma resource sharing form to place the request. We mentioned the display logic. Display logic as a standard means by which configurations of the Get It and View It services may be used. This is where you can set up rules to hide away the resource sharing if, for example, you have locally requestable resources, or if you'd like to hide away this link from specific user groups. This is standard configurations, and this is just for you to note that the resource sharing service, just as any other View It or Get It service, may also be configured via the display logic rules. Okay, so this is an example of a display logic rule that would say that undergraduates will not get the link if I have self-ownership, meaning I have resources that are locally owned that I expect these students to use instead of going out to a resource sharing request. So that is just an example of a rule that may be set up via the display logic rules. Another option for placing requests is the Citation Linker. The Citation Linker is a link that may be used by Primo to generate an open URL to Alma when the metadata that is required has not been found in Primo. So we have described until now a process where you start a search in Primo, you find some metadata, and you place a request on it. Maybe, however, that you have not found or have not executed a search, but instead use the Citation Linker. In the Citation Linker, as you see, you have a form where you can type in metadata. So if you're looking for Power of Will, you can just place that title in the Citation Linker form, and clicking Go from here will trigger an open URL straight to Alma, which will respond with a services page, which is actually just like a search result in Primo. Again, you have the request options on the top, and if the metadata that you've typed has some match into the Alma inventory, you will see other services, including request, digitization, or an items list and a holdings list. If, of course, there is no match and Power of Will does not exist in your inventory, you will not see items lists, you will not see request or digitization options, but you will have a resource sharing request option, which will enable you to place a request for the metadata that you've typed in. So that will be the way to submit a resource sharing request for metadata that you have not found in Primo. And this is here an example of metadata that has been typed in and has not found a match with Alma repository. So there are no request and digitization options, there are no items lists, no holdings lists. It's just the option to place resource sharing requests. Requests, once placed, will be listed on the My Account in Primo. So here's an example of resource sharing request that has been placed and is just listed with the other requests that I have listed in my Primo My Account. And now, if we go on with the workflow, we have a borrowing request found in the borrowing request task list within Primo. We can see the request now. We can see that it has a status of created borrowing request. We can use the send query to Patron option here if we want additional information from the patron. So that link will trigger a pop-out enabling to send an email to the requester, for example, requesting more information about this. Is there a specific edition that you're interested in, and so on. Or we'll find a number of matches. Are you interested in volume 1 or volume 2? This type of query may be sent out using this send query to patron option. It will actually mark this request as needs patron information and will make it facetable, so that all these requests that are marked as requiring patron information will be facetable in a list of facets. So that's a list of facets that shows up on the left side of the boring request task list. One of the facets here is, does this need patron information? But as you can see, we can facet by the request status, by who the active partner is, who has been this request has been sent to, creation date, update date, requested format, digital or physical, the actually supplied format, and so on. Clicking Edit on the requests shows the request information where the fields may be edited. Information such as the requested journal title or the volume issue may be changed from this screen. And in addition, the partner to which the request will be sent may be selected from here. And just a note about partners and rotas. Partners are actually the potential suppliers that are to be communicated. You add them in the fulfillment configuration under the resource sharing option for adding partners. So these are just the specific partners with which you would like to communicate. Partners may be bundled into rotas, which are actually groups of partners that may be managed as one group. So for example, I may have a rota of all of the partners that are geographically closest to me, and I put them into one rota so that I can assign a request to that rota, meaning I want this request to go to one of the partners that is nearest to me because they will be able to supply this faster. Or I may have a rota of all the suppliers that are have the cheapest rates for resource sharing requests. So I may bundle them into one rota, call it the cheap partners rota, and be able to assign a request to that rota because I want the request to be supplied by one of these cheap suppliers. I don't want to go into expensive suppliers. In short, you may bundle partners in any way and then be able to assign a request to a rota. That will be done with the Add Rota button. If 3 partners have been bundled into a rota, clicking Add Rota will enable you to assign all the 3 partners directly to the request, as opposed to the Add Partner option, which will enable you to add one partner at a time. Rotas may come into flavors. They may be ordered rotas, and they may be non-ordered rota. When creating the rota, you select whether this rota is going to be ordered or not. If it's not ordered, as in this example, you see just a list of partners, and the order by which they're sequenced does make a difference. When attaching the partners to the request, they will be attached to the request in some random order. So you may have partner 1, 3, and 2 attached to the request in this order, or it may be 2, 3, and 1 in a reverse order, meaning Alma will contact first partner 1 and only then partner 3, or partner 2 and only then partner 3, and this will be totally random. So if you do not care which of these partners you want to communicate, in fact, if you want it to be random because you want to balance how the requests are fulfilled, you will be using these non-ordered rotas. So that's how you define the type, and then you add partners to your rota, and they will be added to the requests in some random order. That is opposed to the ordered type of rota. In this case, when you're adding partners, you say where you want to add them, and you may move the partners up or down your Rota, because this order means that when I click Add Rota and attach this Rota to my request, the partners will be added in this exact sequence. First 1, then 3, then 2, so that Alma will first contact partner 1, then partner 3, and then partner 2. And this will be relevant where you do have some preference as to which partner will be communicated with in what sequence. So we had our request. We attached either a list of partners or a Rota or more than one Rota to our request. The first partner that is attached to this request is the one that we will send this request to when we click on the Send link. That will actually send the request, and as we can see, we'll get the feedback that the request has been sent, and the request status will change to request sent to partner. This means that the request has gone out as an ISO request to the partner, which is expected to be some ISO compliant system. Maybe Alma, maybe Aleph, maybe any other ISO compliant system. If we now look at the lending side, the lender received this request via the ISO message, and the request is automatically registered in the lending task list, which we're looking at right now. We can see the request has been registered. We can see that it got the status of resource located and created lending request, meaning it's a new request in my lending requests task list. Now the lender will need to ship away this item. And as we mentioned, there are two ways to ship away this item, either as a physical one or as a digital shipment. Physical shipment means I'll be getting this item off a shelf and sending physically the item to the borrower. That will be done using the Manage Fulfillment options that we've mentioned before when we were looking at the broker option. So again, using the Manage Fulfillment option, I'll see that I do have some physical item, and I'll choose the request option that we've seen a couple of minutes ago, and select the Ship Physically option to place a move request. The move request will trigger the process of moving the item to the resource sharing library, and we'll not go through the details of that. It is just a standard move request. Placing the request, by the way, marks the request as with an alert saying that there is a move request in progress. Just to briefly go through the process, the item will be pulled off the shelf at the main library where it is shelved, will be wandered in at the scan-in interface where the system will tell the operator move it to the resource sharing library. Once received at the resource sharing library, the item of course will go in transit, and then received at the resource sharing library, it will change its temporary location. As we mentioned, the item will become owned by the resource sharing library as a temporary owner. This will cause the fulfillment terms of use and rules that we've mentioned to take effect, so the item will be controlled. For example, by a request rule at the resource sharing library that says the item is no longer requestable once it's been shipped away for resource sharing request. The request itself will also be marked as shipped physically on the lending side. Doing this shipping on the lending side sends an ISO message to the borrower saying that I've shipped. It's called a ship message, and it notifies the borrower that the item has been shipped. So the borrower knows to expect this item to arrive soon. Looking back at the borrowing side task list, we can see that the item is marked as shipped physically. That happened because the ISO ship message has been received and automatically managed by the borrowing side. So now the operator on the borrowing side knows this item has been shipped. It knows the update date when this has been shipped, and knows to expect the item to be physically received soon. And if, say, a week has passed by and the item has not physically shown up at the library, to start querying about what happened to this item. But if the item is received and physically received by the borrower, the borrower will register the fact that the item is received using a receive action. The receive action is a row action on the on the borrowing request, and clicking on it will trigger the receive interface, prompting the requester to assign the temporary item. This receive action is when the borrower will assign the temporary item, actually put the item into a sleeve or attach some temporary barcode and mark this barcode in Alma. This barcode is what will be used to later loan this item to the requesting patron. Another option to do the receive action is using a dedicated interface, receiving items link that will open a dedicated interface, which is pretty much like what we've just seen. It will enable the operator to identify the checked in item, the received item, using its external identifier, the request identifier. And when putting in that external identifier, again the user will be prompted for the temporary barcode that will be later used to loan this item to the requesting patron. So now we've received the item. Wanting in this item will mark it to be moved to its pickup location. Say it is the main library. And now a transit process will start, and actually this is standard. The item is put in transit to the requested pickup location, which is the main library, and when arriving at the main library and wanted in at the scan-in interface, is going to be placed on a hold shelf and eventually also loaned out to the patron, with the due date being set according to the fulfillment terms of use that are set up for the resource sharing library, as we've mentioned. As you can see, this is a standard loan. It is done at the standard main library circulation desk or any other circulation desk where the patron requested to pick up this item. It is a standard loan. It's going to show up on the loan list in Primo, in Alma. It's going to have a due date. It's going to have courtesy notices, overdue notices, all of that being sent for this loan being a standard loan. Once the patron returns the item, using the return interface to do that, and again the main library return interface may be used to just want in the item to mark it as returned. Alma, when the item is checked in, will discharge the patron and notify the operator that this item needs to go back to the resource sharing library for the purpose of sending it back to the original lending institution. The item will be marked as in transit, and the borrowing request will be marked as returned by patron. The loan no longer exists. The item still does exist, as the request has not been sent yet back to the lending institution, which is the next step. We can see the return option showing up on the borrowing request task list. This is where the borrower is able to ship the item back to the lender, or actually the borrower may do that by actually using the scanning interface when at the resource sharing library and just scanning in the item barcode. Alma will identify that this is a temporary item that needs to be shipped back to the resource sharing library. It will notify the operator what this item, what request this item is associated with, and will trigger the return action. The return action actually means that the item will now be deleted from the borrower side. The item, the holdings, the bib record, the entire hierarchy is going to be deleted, and the resource sharing request will be marked as completed. This will also send the message to the lending side, the ISO message, so that the lending side request will also be automatically marked as completed. The other way to fulfill the request is as a document delivery service, sending away a digital file rather than a physical item. This may be done by digitizing a physical item or by using an already digital format resource. So, just to go briefly through the workflow and describe the digital aspects of it, when the request is first placed on the borrowing side, there is an option to specify how I want to receive this. in what format. Would it be digital or physical? If I select digital, that will go through to the lending request, so that on the lending task list I will see that this item is requested to be shipped digitally. So I can see that this information came through, and the request is to ship it in digital format. I, as the operator, will use my fulfillment options to see what the options are. We've seen this interface before. And if I see that all I have is a physical item, I don't have this in digital format, I may decide to place a request, and this time to use the Ship Digitally option to place a digitization request. This will be a standard digitization request, so that the process of digitizing will start with the item being paged for pickup from the main library where it is owned through the pickup requested resources task list. This is all standard fulfillment digitization process. Wanting it in at the main library will notify the operator that this is required to the digitization department, and wanting in at the digitization department will start the process of digitizing this. Optionally, there may be a need for an approval, and again, this is standard digitization process. We'll not go into details of that. So that eventually, after the approval is done and the item is digitized, the next step will take us on to attach documents. So that the item, the digital files, will now be attached to an email and sent to the requester. So, when clicking on Attach Documents, I'll get the standard document delivery screen, and the only difference now is going to be that when I do done, and I'm actually done with this process of attaching the digital files, the resource sharing request will be marked as shipped digitally. So the lending request is now marked as shipped digitally. The email with the attached digital file has been sent, and in addition, an ISO message has been sent to the borrower notifying that the item has been shipped, but not in physical format, but rather in digital format. So the borrower request is also marked as shipped digitally. When the email arrives, and as per configuration, the email may have been sent by the lender directly to the requesting patron, or, as will be the common case, to the requesting library, so that the operator will look up in his inbox and find the sent material, and if he's fine with this material, it is in good quality and it matches the request parameters that have been set forth by the requesting patron, the operator on the borrowing side may say, okay, I got this item, I'm happy with it, and I'm going to forward it to my patron. Clicking on Receive in this case will open up the Receive interface, but marking now the digital option here will enable me to just say I'm done with this request. There's no need to return it. It's been received as a digital file, and by that actually close the cycle. There's no next step of returning this. It's been received as digital. The requests will be marked as completed also on the lending side based on the received ISO message that has been sent from the borrower to the lender. And actually this terminates the process on both the borrowing side and the lending side. As you see, the digital supply is of course a shorter cycle, being that there's no return of the resource back to the lender. Just 2 words about a situation where there's no need for digitization. The item already exists on the lending side as a digital content. So when I'm looking at the lending request, I see that I, in the fulfillment options, already have this as a digital resource. I can just go on and do document delivery, getting to the same screen that we've seen before, where I can attach files and just do done, send the email, and by that have the request marked as shipped digitally. So it is actually, in terms of the resource sharing process, the same process of shipping digitally, only there was no digitization request to process in between. I already had the resource in digital format, so there was no need for that. This pretty much wraps up the currently supported peer-to-peer process. In addition to what I've shown you now, the lender also has an option to reject a request. So there's an action on the lending request that enables the lender to just say, I cannot supply this. The borrower, when receiving this message, will automatically turn on to the next supplier on the list of potential suppliers and send the request to that supplier, and so on. And in addition, there's an option for the borrower to also cancel a request and send the cancellation to the lender, actually terminating the process with that lender and going on to another potential supplier, sending the request to that potential supplier. That pretty much wraps up the peer-to-peer workflow. Just before we finish, I would just like to mention that although what I've described to you is a peer-to-peer process that is based on ISO messages going back and forth, there is another option for peer-to-peer communications, which is based on emails. So if your partner is not ISO compliant, there's still an option to define that partner as an email partner. That will trigger the message to be sent out as an email rather than an ISO message. Also, just to comment, there's also the ArtMail option. If the partner is marked as an ArtMail partner, doing a send will actually send the ArtMail message. This, of course, is used where the partner is British Library. That's where ArtMails are used. And just to mention that ArtMail is, of course, another option, so that sending requests to British Library via ArtMail are possible by marking the ISO partner as ArtMail. Just one last word is that resource sharing also exists in analytics. It is a supported subject area, so that reports may also be created within analytics based on request information. So that is pretty much all I wanted to share with you today. We've described both the broker side, the broker model, and the peer-to-peer model. We've gone through the entire workflow for borrower and for lender, and briefly through some configurations describing the entire workflow. Thank you very much.